London's last line of defence was the Thames. In 1381, there was only one place to cross: London Bridge. By putting pillars of the community like John Mocking at the front of the crowd, the rebels persuaded the aldermen defending London Bridge to lower the drawbridge. The peasant army swept across the bridge and into the defenceless city.
Presumably going to follow round and get over that way.
I've only got a token force, but we're following the exact route the rebels took. As they flooded into the city and out onto Fleet Street, it must have been like an invading army. Many Londoners supported the revolt and turned out to welcome the peasants. But there was fear and panic too, as the peasants started to hunt down their targets.
They didn't just hate the priests and the nobility, they loathed the lawyers, especially the corrupt ones who rigged trials in favour of the rich. So when they arrived at the courts of justice, they burst in, dragged out the lawyers and cut their heads off.
These were tough countrymen with their own idea of rough justice. There was no mercy for the people they believed had betrayed the king. And the chief traitor in their eyes was John of Gaunt, the king's uncle. The rebels believed he was the evil power behind the throne, pushing the young king into making all the wrong decisions and getting rich himself. Lucky for him, Gaunt was on the Scottish border when the peasants struck, or he would have been a dead man. Instead, the peasants vented their anger on his palace at the Savoy. Where the Savoy Hotel stands now was one of the grandest palaces in the kingdom. It was a storehouse for Gaunt's wealth, a treasure trove of jewels, exquisite furniture, robes, finery and cash, which the people believed had been siphoned off from the poll tax. Around 4 o'clock on the afternoon of the 13th of June, it became the chief target for all the pent-up hatred and passion of the peasants' revolt.
They came bursting in here, raced into the palace, smashing everything up, tearing up clothes. They got arrows which they set fire to, and then they fired the arrows into the clothes. It would have been absolute chaos in here. Hiya. Can we ride our horses into your nice hotel? I got 300 peasants outside. Can I bring those in too? No?
Where can we park the horses?
In the stables.
In the stables round the back. Nothing much changes in a few hundred years, does it? Can I come in on my own? I'm booked in for a cup of tea. I'm going to get a cup of tea.
600 years ago, the gatekeepers at the Savoy were on the peasants' side. They let them right in, thousands of them, peasants, gentry, countrymen and Londoners. We've got the names of over 500. John Mocking, the wine merchant, was there, along with the Manningtree men, John Sumner and Robert Pierce. There were also lowlifes like Richard Scott, a street con man who'd scratched a living cheating gullible visitors to the capital with loaded dice. John and Joan Ferrer from Rochester liberated a chest containing £1,000, rowed it across the river to Southwark and shared it out with their mates. They'd taken a risk though. The rebels were prepared to use extreme violence in their fight against corruption, but looting was banned on pain of death. For them, raiding the Savoy wasn't about gain, it was a symbolic act of destruction. The rebels burnt Gaunt's clothes, smashed his furniture, cut up his silver and gold plates, and threw them in the Thames.
It was a very nice tea, actually. They do a good tea at the Savoy. I think one of the things that our experiments have shown is how different the world was in the Middle Ages. I've nicked you a bit of cake, by the way.
Fantastic.
From
Thank you.
how it is today. For instance, the kind of violence that they meted out in the Peasants' Revolt is unlike anything that there's been in London in my lifetime. They completely destroyed this place and left it in ruins for decades, just to show people what a terrifying thing it was when the peasants revolted. Caroline, the old Savoy doesn't look nearly as grand round the back as it does from the front, does it?
No, but I think perhaps in 1381, this side would have been quite as impressive as the front.
So you've got loads of rioters here, not just people from Kent and Essex, but local people too. Would they have just left their work and mucked in?
I'm quite sure the Londoners participated in the attack on the Savoy. They were obviously opportunist, but they had their own reasons for disliking John of Gaunt. They disliked him because he had tried to extend the jurisdiction of the Crown and threaten the privileges of the City of London.
Do you think this would have had any impact nationally, or was it just a London event?
No, it had a massive impact nationally and in Europe. I mean, it was well known all over Europe that this had happened. I think there's some very close parallels with 9/11 and the kind of impact that that had.
But only 200 or 300 people died here compared with thousands in 9/11.
But think of the population of London. The population of London was perhaps 40,000. So 200 or 300 people is about, 1 in 800. Whereas if you think of New York, population of 8 million, 2,000 die, that's perhaps 1 in 16,000. Massively greater death toll in the Peasants' Revolt in relation to the size of the population. People whom you'd perhaps disregarded and thought of as lower than vermin, of no education, like animals, suddenly you find they're capable of organising something on a massive scale and coordinating it and bringing about a successful breakdown of law and order. And I think after 9/11, everybody was shocked that people had been able to achieve such a coordinated impact. And it was exactly the same in 1381. The chroniclers are horrified that rustic people are able to bring the King's government and the government of London to its knees.
As the rebels took control of London, Richard II became a virtual prisoner in the Tower. Looking out across the city, he would have seen columns of smoke rising from the Savoy Palace.
So what would the atmosphere have been like here in London during the revolt? Well, if you were a lawyer or a priest, you'd probably have been hiding in a cupboard or under the floorboards. But for the ordinary people, it would have been very different. You know what it used to be like on a hot night during the Notting Hill Carnival in the old days? Everyone had had a good time and there was loads of rubbish all over the place and there were people lying face down in the street. But behind all the singing and laughter, there was an undercurrent of something much more violent and sinister.
Some started to use the revolt as a cover to settle private grudges. It wasn't just corrupt officials that were hauled out for summary executions.
One of the nastiest aspects of the revolt was a series of what nowadays we'd call racist attacks. The targets were the Belgians, or the Flemish as they were then known. What had they done wrong? Well, they were foreign and they made a lot of money, and that was enough. The rioters would seek them out, they'd grab someone, throw them against a wall and get them to say the words bread and cheese.